Hello there, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. It's the beginning of August Bank Holiday weekend, and although I'm waiting for a new rotary cutter to arrive, I do have pre-cut jelly roll strips, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with them. eBay is the place that I bought them from, and these are 10 different designs of, well, no, there's a repeat pattern in there, but actually there's 10 jelly roll strips of 22 inches, and the 22 inches includes the selvage edge. So let's just be a busy bee this August Bank Holiday weekend. Come with me and we'll see what we can achieve, starting with these 10 22-inch jelly roll strips. Let's with the steam iron, it's hard to press out the central crease, so I'll try and avoid that in the same place if I can. And what appears to be a random pattern is not. There actually is a directional design in this. Although the bees do go in different directions on the yellow, they're all in one direction on the white, so I'll take that into account. I have seen a name on the edge, and I'm going to check out who Nevitt Fabrics are. I'm using an 80 universal needle, and my presser foot measures 1/4 of an inch to this edge, and I'm going to use that as my guide. All my seams are going to be 1/4 of an inch all the way along. I'm going to take my 2.5 inch square and turn it on the diagonal, and then I'm going to take my first jelly strip and I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm going to put the top corner here so that the seam I want to sew is along this edge. Like this, I'm going to pin it in place and then I'm going to sew it. Can't do this with one hand. I'm going to show you in photographs, and then I'm going to sew along that edge. I always recommend starting and ending with a back stitch. Turn your fabric over and finger press along this seam. I'm now going to take my next design and I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm going to take it so that the long side of the jelly strip meets this edge and my top corner meets this top corner of the first pattern design, and I'm going to pin those together. When you're working on the diagonal, the fabric wants to pull straight all the time, so pinning on this I think is very important. And then I'm going to sew along that seam with a 1/4 inch seam to pin in place to show where the fabric underneath ends, so I know where to sew to. And you'll notice with this, in order to get the seam where I want it to be, my design is upside down. The other thing I've done is I've just put the fabric that's pulling, I've just used a side table or the edge of the table just to take the weight of that fabric, just to stop it from pulling and distorting the design. Open it out and finger press this seam. My next piece of fabric is going to go to this top point, and my fabrics right side together are going to be sewn along this edge. Remember I said that there's a directional design, so when it comes to the next piece that I'm going to put, and when you put right sides together you're turning your fabric upside down, it's important that those bees look the right way up. When I come to a stopping point from a scene, I'm always lining up with this grey edge. The fabric I'm using has a 5 pattern repeat, so I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm now going to start on this side, alternating the pattern. So this first piece is now going to go, it will go next to the bee as it happens, but you'll see that the design looks different. So all that are on this side will then appear over here, and all of these on this side will appear on the left. So the left will become the right, and the right will become on the left. until we use up all the pattern pieces. So with the 5-piece pattern repeated, you can see the design coming out, and you've got a chevron going right up the middle. I'm going to press this now before I decide what to do next. So in effect, what we've created here is a square, a 12-inch square, and I could just cut it off here at this point if I wanted to and have it that way. You'll see that I've used more fabric on the longer side here than I have here, which means that the tails that I've got are longer from the first lot of fabric that I used compared with the later fabric that I used. But I'm not going to use it on the square. I want it as a chevron plait. To do that, I'm going to turn it because it looks way more impressive on the diagonal. And you've got a chevron. Some call it a French braid. Now, I've still got the equivalent of a 12-inch square here, and I could just stop there. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut these ends off, and I'm going to keep on sewing with the longer pieces first to just make this braid bigger and longer. So I've now got a piece that measures 16 by 18. I'm going to stop now and have some tea. I'm going to think of how I can border this, because I want to turn this now. I want to turn this diamond that I have, this unequal diamond, into something that's going to be capable of becoming a lap blanket. So let me think about what to do next. So this is where I have to be creative. I want to do my central piece on point. And as you remember, I said it was 16 by 19, which means that I'm going to try and have to square it up somehow. And I had a thought about that overnight. And what I'm going to do is use these godettes. Now, this is reclaimed cotton from a 100% cotton shirt. It's absolutely beautiful. Look at that with the broderie anglais on it. I think that goes really well with the bees. Now, a godette is a piece that is put in to create the flare in a skirt. So when you take a dress or a skirt apart that's A-line, you've got these pieces, and I've left them in that shape. And that might come in very handy for what I'm wanting to do here next. From the seam to the tip, they measure 20 inches. The intention of using the godettes is to create a square piece or an oblong piece of cloth that I can then add borders and trim to. What I need to do is ensure I can square it up at the bottom, so it'll look like there are triangles on 4 corners, but I need to leave sufficient for a seam allowance on each edge, and I might only have an inch or so. So I'm going to sew those right sides together at that point, and I think I'm just going to mark that before I move anything to the machine. So I've marked it, and now I've got it right sides together. I can see my erasable line, and that is right on the edge of the fabric. I've pinned it, I've marked it so I know that this is top right, and I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch inside that line all the way down. So the next thing is to iron and to trim here. I'm now adding an 8-inch border of white cotton all the way around. first I'm doing the top and bottom, and then I'll add them on the sides. It's getting bigger, so it's getting harder for me to photograph, but I've now got a 40-inch square, and I'm going to accentuate the fact that it's square with the borders, and I'm going to add something to add interest into that border, and that's going to be a very vibrant yellow. And I've cut it from reclaimed cotton, and I've cut it, and I'm going to sew it about midway, and I'm going to sew it with 2 track lines, and I'm going to sew it so that this, as it's washed, will start to fray, so it will start to get a bit of a chenille effect as it goes through the wash. The more times it washes, the softer this will become, but because I don't want this to come off in the wash, I'm going to make sure I double stitch it, and I'm going to stitch it to accentuate that as far as I can, to accentuate that square, and I'm going to patch piece it. So it doesn't matter how many pieces I put together to create this. As long as I attach it well, it's not going to come off in the wash. Well, it's now getting harder to photograph it. I've got it on the bed, and the colouring, the lighting in here isn't brilliant, but you can see how that extra yellow border really makes that zing. But I want to add a header and a footer to make it oblong, and I need to look at what to do with that header and footer. I'm going to use the same white cotton. I'm going to be backing it with this, so there's some cohesion here, and I'm going to be binding it with this check cotton that I've got on the edge. So I've got a number of options here. One is to introduce a green, but it's a green stripe, and I don't know whether that's too much. There is a green in there. Is this too dark? Is a stripe? Yeah, I think a stripe might just be... Although there are stripes on the bees, aren't there? There are, but will that be too much? I'm not sure. The other thing I thought of was just some lace. Does that make it look a bit pale beside it? That's a possibility. But the person that this is going to isn't really a lacy person. The idea I've got, I want some cohesion here. And I've got these pieces of fabric left. And what I have in my head is, can I generate some pieces just for appliqué from these? And I've also got something else. I'm not going to show you that. Oh yeah, you see, I've got some quite nice pieces here. I think within the border, I'm going to create some appliqué and stitch those in. I can either stitch them in, so where I've got half a piece there, I can either stitch it into the seam, which looks like it's coming out of the seam. I quite like that. Actually, I quite like that idea. Let's see what I can do. I've got some quite long sides, and I've got some quite big pieces. I'm going to go and have a think, and I'll show you what I've decided to do once I've done it. Right, my borders are finished, my header and footer, and you can see I've done just a running stitch around the edge. So again, we've got raw edges, and I've just appliqued a little bee, and I've also appliqued a little bee just coming out of the seam here. And I'm now going to turn this border right sides together and attach the top and the bottom.